Hey guys, Welcome25 here, watching launch of Eutelsat something and Intelsat something. I'm terrible at remembering names, if you've noticed. It's Ariane 5, as you can clearly tell. Oh. Ariane Space.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome for 7th launch of the year from the Guyana Space Center, the 4th with Ariane 5 in 2050. Tonight, Ariane 5 is set to deliver into an optimized geostationary transfer orbit two telco satellites, Eutelsat 8 West B for Eutelsat and Intelsat 34 for Intelsat. Ariane 5 will be required a performance slightly below 10 tons. It will have a window of 1 hour and 46 minutes to lift off, opening precisely at 8:10 p.m. Universal Time. The mission will last 42 minutes approximately. I would like to thank Eutelsat for entrusting Ariane Space with the launch of 30 of its satellites. Once on location, Eutelsat 8 West B, manufactured by Thales Alenia Space in its Cannes facility, will primarily strengthen Eutelsat's direct broadcasting services above North Africa and the Middle East, and thus comfort its leadership above this region. I am also grateful to Intelsat for its decision to select Ariane Space for the launch of Intelsat 34, the 55th Intelsat satellite to be orbited by our launch vehicle family. Manufactured by Space Systems LoRa in Palo Alto, Intelsat 34 will provide direct-to-home television services above Latin America, as well as broadband access to aeronautical and maritime customers requiring connectivity in the North Atlantic Ocean. Tonight, Ariane Space is particularly proud to be in charge of a launch mission for the two first Ariane 5 commercial customers, also belonging to the top 3 private operators acting in the field of satellite communications. But our 81st Ariane 5 is now being readied for liftoff, so enjoy the show.
Greetings, everybody, wherever you may be, and welcome once again to Kourou, the home of the Ariane family, for today's live broadcast of Ariane Space Flight number 225, an international launch for two old friends tonight with Eutelsat and Intelsat. Joshua Jampol here, coming to you live, as usual, from the Jupiter Mission Control Center here at the Guyana Space Base. We will be bringing you all the action in this 7th launch of the year for Ariane Space, so we hope you will stay with us. All is green for the moment for another international mission tonight. As Ariane 5 waits patiently on the pad for her moment in the sun, we can take a close look at her. She stands 54 meters tall, weighs about 775 tons, and is in two parts, a lower composite and an upper one. The lower composite includes the main core stage and the two boosters, so 3 power sources. The boosters, you can see standing on either side, are 31 meters tall. The upper component includes the single upper stage engine, also the vehicle equipment bay where the computers are, and the fairing inside, which are the 2 satellites. We'll describe each of these stages in detail while they're functioning, so you can follow Ariane as she makes her way across the Atlantic, and we'll have more on the 2 satellites as well. The launch window tonight, an hour 45, so plenty of time. Launch time will be 17:10 local, 16:10 on the U.S. East, and 22:10 Paris. Some of the key players who make the mission happen, this is the Arianespace High Command, the Flight Directorate. Stefan Israel you saw. With him, Louis Laurent, who's the Senior VP for Programs. Edward Perez, the top technical officer for Ariane and a living technical memory of all flights. And rounding out the team, Patrick Noir, who heads up Arianespace Kourou facilities here. These are the top four. In our first film tonight, a look at our upper passenger Eutelsat 8 West B. We'll be hearing first from Arianespace's Beatrice Romero.
Flight 225 of the Ariane launch vehicle will carry on the upper position Eutelsat 8 West B, which will be the 30th satellite launched by Arianespace for the telecommunications operator Eutelsat.
I'm pleased to make this video today because I know that when you will be watching it, we will be at the end of almost 3 years of efforts by the teams of Eutelsat, Thales Alenia Space, Arianespace and Spacial Guyane, who have been involved in the design, construction, test and preparation of EAWB for launch. EAWB is one of the more sophisticated television satellites ever built for Eutelsat. It will reinforce Eutelsat in-orbit resources at 7-8 degrees west, which is one of the most dynamic neighborhoods in the global satellite TV market, with more than 52 million homes in North Africa and in the Middle East.
We would like to thank Eutelsat for the confidence and loyalty, and we will see you soon for the next launch campaign.
Seventh launch of the year tonight, as Stefan Israel said, and the seventh in 7 months for Arianespace. It's also the fourth of the year for the Ariane 5, with plenty more coming up in the second half of the year, which promises to be just as busy. Start of the countdown here in Jupiter began this morning. The building was activated at 7. Checks on the range and the pad began 7:45. Everything was cleared during a dress rehearsal on August 14th. We're going to go over to Marie-Laure Chauffeur of Arianespace now for a look at our second passenger, Intelsat 34.
Arianespace is very proud to be once again involved in the deployment of a new satellite for Intelsat and to contribute to the expansion of this major operator.
It's great to be back here in Kourou for another launch campaign. This is my 6th campaign here in the last 7 years, and I can say without a doubt, this has been the smoothest of all these campaigns. And for that, I would like to thank SSL MBA, Arianespace, CSG, and our friends at Freelance for making our stay here in Kourou a pleasant one.
Intelsat 34 will be respectively the 55th Intelsat satellite and 51st SSL satellite to be launched with an Ariane vehicle.
We are approaching a key moment in the launch countdown. It's the synchronized sequence, or the automatic sequence. You'll hear the voice of the Range Operations Manager call out the milestone. It's this man here, Antoine Guillaume. The Range Operations Manager, also called the DDO.
À tous de DDO, arrêt du décompte suite à un rouge ensemble de lancement. Que tous les moyens restent prêts pour la reprise de la chronologie de AH0-7 minutes, des retours au vert.
All right, you heard Antoine de Guillaume say we have a hold in the countdown. You can see it's red on the 7-minute mark. And I don't know, when you have a shot of Jupiter, you can see in the very back on the green status panels in the back of the hall, you see it's also red there. And the next time the camera comes up, we'll mention that. But normally, when things are green, we proceed through to the synchronized sequence. We are holding on the synchronized sequence now. Antoine Guillaume said we have a red on the ensemble de lancement. You can see it there, ensemble de lancement, which means the entire overall base.
Oh, yeah.
So no idea what the problem might be, but we are holding. The green status panels there are a green, red, no, and go resume of everything it takes to launch. Green we go. Whenever there's a red, we stop, which is the case now. So the DDO also said to be ready to restart the countdown soon. So they are holding. What happens when they're holding? It's quite a normal situation. It gives us time to sort out any problems. It's like a stop sign in your car. What's happening now is all the teams are looking at the parameters, looking at why there as a whole, analyzing them. And while this is going on, the launcher goes into a safe configuration so it'll be ready to go once the problem has been solved. And once the problem is solved, we will start the countdown. Again, the launch operations director now checking with his assistants, making sure the computers have putting the launcher into safe configuration while we're holding. The teams are preparing a solution or an alternative to deal with the problem. And people on the phones around here talking to their teams, deciding what exactly to do. If you just joined us, we started off and we came down to the 7-minute mark. And we have a hold in the countdown on tonight's launch, Eutelsat 8 West B, Intelsat 34. We mentioned the red is like a stop sign. So what we're doing now is stopping and thinking. People begin to examine the unexpected parameter. As we said before, we don't know what the unexpected parameter might be. It could be anything. It's useless to speculate. And for later on, people are beginning to examine how to move back into the launch window. Remember, we said the launch window is 1 hour and 45 minutes. That's plenty of time.
That's almost 2 hours, so we should be able to get up and get the vehicle off the ground.
So I think what we're going to do is cut away, and we'll be back with you once we have solved the problem. Don't go away.
I'll pause recording until then. I'll restart it once the count has been resumed, or is approaching being resumed. So yeah, see you guys then. Okay guys, it would appear the problem has been resolved, so I'm presuming the count will resume shortly. Let's see guys what happens.
Moyen ELA, attention pour la reprise de la chronologie.
Countdown has been resumed.
The DDO, as you heard, has said we can resume the countdown.
Début de la séquence finale lanceur. Le nouvel âge zéro visé est 20h34 et 1 minute. Et 1 seconde.
Okay, so
Je répète, le nouvel âge zéro visé est 20h34 et 1 seconde.
Okay, well, the DDO has set us going again. You can see the clock is ticking. And we're going to show you how Ariane 5 was put together in her launch campaign. Back with more in a moment. Some parts of Ariane 5 come to French Guiana by ship from Europe. They then travel by road to the space base where their assembly begins in the launcher integration building. The lower stage is erected vertically and the 2 solid boosters are transported to this building and positioned on either side. Then the upper stage is integrated onto the lower stage. At this point, Ariane is moved to the final assembly building. The satellites also follow a preparation campaign. It's carried out in parallel with assembly of the launch vehicle in facilities dedicated to satellite operations. Special teams work in clean rooms, weighing and testing everything from electric cables to solar panels. With these tests completed, the satellites are then filled with fuel. The satellites, in their turn, then move to the final assembly building for what's called combined operations and are mated atop the launcher. Intelsat 34 was put in place first in the lower position, then Eutelsat 8 West B was enclosed inside the fairing which was hoisted atop the launcher. In all, a campaign takes 6 weeks to ready both launcher and satellites. During the campaign, Arianespace and customer teams meet daily to monitor all activities. At a final launch readiness review on August 18th, these teams gave the green light for the launcher to be rolled out to her position on the pad. Fixed to the launch table, here Ariane 5 awaits the final countdown and the start of her mission. Gives you an idea of some of the complex procedures that must be carried out for each launch here. Each campaign is different because the passengers change, but generally the campaign follows the same procedures. Look at the green status panels on the right there. The space base here covers a lot of ground, 750 square kilometers, and a lot goes on, but all the activities can be summed up by these status panels. What they are is a go, no-go, green, red resume of everything it takes to successfully prepare, launch, and follow Ariane. Green means okay, red means the opposite. It's very simple. If we get a red in any of these areas, we stop the countdown, as you saw just moments ago. Whatever held us up is holding us up no longer, and you can see we're just under 4 minutes from liftoff. The panels are there. We checked them during the first part of the mission before lifting off. The status of these services, and you saw them there, the launcher, the satellites, the weather, telemetry, everything, are sent in here to Jupiter from the different outposts, which is why we call Jupiter the nerve center of the space base. But other people are working tonight, among them up here, the launch management teams, under the direction of Patrick Lucet, you heard talking about the launcher campaign. This is the Launch Control Center, and 3 main teams are working. One is responsible for launch operations, a second for flight readiness of the launcher, and a third follows the countdown from a quality point of view, according to established procedures. In all, about 100 people up there. They're closer to the pad than we are here in Jupiter. We're about 13, 14 kilometers away, but they're right next door. They're 1 kilometer away. The control center, you see them sitting in, has walls that are 1 meter thick. They carry out all the checks and validations down to liftoff that will let the mission begin. Once the launchers left the pad, their work is done. Some other things that we have to take into account when launching: a French Space Operations Act passed in 2008 makes it mandatory to show that you're preventing any possible collision with the International Space Station. Remember, the ISS, flying roughly 400 kilometers above us, makes a pass around the Earth every 90 minutes or so, so sometimes if the ISS is in Ariane's projected flight path, we change the launch window, but that's not the case tonight. This version of Ariane, mainly for commercial launches, going east into what they call eventually geostationary transfer orbit. Take a look at the split screen image now. This is one of the last things you're going to see. We just want to mention it briefly. These are the propellant feeder arms, liquid hydrogen on the left, liquid oxygen on the right. We monitor these arms down to the last minute because we're filling the upper stage with very cold cryogenic fuel, and it boils off in the weather here. You see the yellow bars in the middle of your screen, those are the arms. And keep your eyes on them at liftoff because they have to swing back. They have to pull back in order to start the ignition sequence going. If they don't pull back, we don't go anywhere.
Well, you would
Minute and a half to go until the mission begins. We want to say hello to our friends at Eutelsat and our friends in the Mideast, where they're watching. At Intelsat headquarters, just outside Washington, all of you taking the broadcast, we hope you're enjoying the evening.
Attention pour moins 1 minute.
The DDO is going to call out the 1 minute mark, and we'll be into the final 60 seconds.
Top.
1 minute.
H0 moins 1 minute.
All that's left to explain is the final ignition sequence. It starts when the yellow cryo arms pull back. Remember to watch for that. That gets the ball rolling. And then watch for this. At H0, the DDO will call out allumage volcan. That's the ignition of the main stage, the cryogenic engine. But we don't lift off yet. There will be a 7-second wait while the onboard computer checks the performance of the engine. It does this twice. If all is well, to light the 2 solid boosters, and we go. We will let you watch liftoff of Arianespace flight number 225, Eutelsat 8 West B and Intelsat 34. Final countdown.
À tous de vidéo, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain.
Lift off.
Allumage ERP, décollage.
No, we not want to be that bird.
paramètres bord sont normaux.
The Ariane's performed.
So the arms swung back as scheduled. You saw it there. We had ignition, and you saw Ariane 5 begin her mission, rising off the ground here in French Guiana with a
Les
lot of
paramètres
fire,
bord sont normaux.
right on time, at little past the original launch window because we had to hold the countdown. But we're fine now. The DDO says everything is okay on board with our two passengers,
La
Eutelsat 8
trajectoire
West
est
B
nominale.
and Intelsat 34. We are underway. The boosters providing over 90% of the thrust, propelling the launcher along its trajectory at ever higher velocity, getting her away from the pull of the Earth. And there's a lot to pull. Ariane's weight at liftoff about 775 tons. Most of that's fuel. She's burning 5 tons of fuel every second, 2.5 tons in each booster, and the core stage burning another
Les
300
paramètres bord
kilos
sont normaux.
per second. Ariane now following the flight program in the onboard computer, which gives all the commands, including stage separations. We'll soon begin to see those.
La trajectoire est nominale.
We are in the first of 4 flight phases. The first 3 are powered. The last is not. We'll describe each in turn so you can follow Ariane as she heads across the Atlantic. Right now, the first flight phase, the Vulcan engine and the 2 boosters are burning. The boosters will burn their propellant in just under 2.5 minutes, about 20 seconds to go. And they'll be the first we jettison. You'll hear the DDO call out that milestone too. We're heading east over the Atlantic. The decision to build the site here in French Guiana made in the 60s when France wanted a new base, in part for its opening on the water, to allow for launches over uninhabited areas.
Boost us up.
On the animation you saw the
Séparation des étages,
separation
l'accélération
of the booster, so we'd had that right on time, the confirmation by the DDO. Right on time.
On your own path, does he say?
De már kilőtték.
Már felraktam.
Lehet internetről.
Persze, hogy csak ez megy.
Lejöttem, nem vagyok.
Jó.
Bocsi, elfelejtettem, akkor addig megyek eszekbe. Témát.
Kivoltunk sajtból és kukoricából.
Miből?
Sajtból és kukoricából. Sajtból és kukoricából.
Sát érted.
Ugye szóval, hogy kukorica már ma sem volt.
Van fenn, nem?
Az bab. Here's the thing, I just need to refresh this. Won't miss much because you can see the booster sep. Watch laugh. Can't put full screen yet because it's still loading.
All contained explosion, we emphasize it's controlled, so there's no threat to the vehicle. Is up, you can see what the jettison of the fairing looks like. There's another half on the right side out of camera range. Above 100 kilometers, there is neither friction nor heating, which could disturb the passengers. Liftoff's very noisy, and a noisy affair which shakes the launcher up.
As you can see, you launch.
We could also discard any dead weight when possible to maximize the launcher's operation. We can do that now. The fairing weighs over 2 tons. We are in the second powered flight phase. The boosters have done their work. Only the single engine burning now. It'll
Les
burn for
paramètres
about
bord sont normaux. Le
9 minutes in
est
all.
nominal.
Our speed is important at this moment, and that's the role of the main stage. Its cryogenic propellant system is not only highly efficient, but provides a push that can last for a long time, like 9 minutes. There are different propulsion systems on the Ariane 5. Cryogenics, as used in the main stage, are more efficient than solid propellant, which is used in the boosters. Basically, solids are for getting us off the ground, away from the pull of the Earth. Cryogenics for more precision orienting of the vehicle, and they can allow for a stage to be reignited in another version of Ariane. We're going to go to a replay of the liftoff that happened just 5 minutes ago, so you can relive those exciting moments. Coming up, Ariane 5 is the heavy lift launcher. The other two members of the family, Soyuz, lifts middle-sized payloads, 2 and 3 tons, and Vega, the light lift vehicle, for 1-ton missions. Here's the replay. You can see from another angle. It's always exciting to live these moments at liftoff. We have cameras at several of the half-dozen observation sites that are stationed across the base. There's another one. It's a big one. It's a big base, 750 square kilometers, about the size of the island of Martinique, our neighbor, if you know Martinique. And these observation sites furnish us with shots from different angles. People also line the beaches to watch the launch, where the view is also quite good. Here's another angle. The closest observation site is called Toucan, and many of the VIPs are out there now. Toucan is closest to the base, about 4 kilometers. Ariane 5's liftoff there lights up the whole place. I don't know if you've ever seen it from there. It's really something to watch. We should have more replay shots, including from Toucan, at the end of the broadcast. Some figures. The 2 passengers tonight are the 164th and 165th satellites to be launched on an Ariane 5. They're also the 318th and 319th to go into geostationary transfer orbit. 2 minutes to go, roughly, in the lower stage burn. On the right is Eutelsat, exposed to the elements. Under that, the black bell-shaped structure, that's called the Silda. That's a carrying structure that allows us to lift a second passenger. And underneath the black Silda is our second passenger, Intelsat 34. Underneath that is the vehicle equipment bay, and the long tube is the first stage, whose engine will be cut off in about a minute, and the first stage will be separated shortly after that, and will be into the second half of the mission when the second stage is lit. Our radar and telemetry signal has been picked up by our first downrange tracking station. That's over the border in Brazil at a place called Natal. Natal will see the lower stage burnout and separation at 8 minutes and 51 seconds, as well as the upper stage ignition. All of Ariane's trajectory has been designed to be followed from the ground. The launcher is sending radar and telemetry back, and a network of stations keeps constant watch on the health of her systems. Telemetry is launch vehicle data, basically. Information on about 1,500 parameters now being collected and transmitted back to the ground stations every second. These include indicators of Ariane's health and performance, and they come from pressure and temperature sensors which record all of her functions throughout the flight. There you saw the shut-off of the lower stage engine, and we'll have in a moment, there it is, the separation of the first stage, and there you saw the engine light up on the second stage, given by the onboard computer in 12 seconds. The main stage will fall into the Atlantic. You can see that's what's happening above. Will fall off the coast of Africa. Up in space, all is well aboard Ariane 5. Our speed, as you can see, approaching 7 kilometers per second, and our altitude approaching 200 kilometers. We're now into the third and final powered flight phase. It's a 16-minute burn for the upper stage. We'll burn until 24 minutes and 54 seconds. The upper stage, about the size of a small studio apartment, and its job is to take the satellites to their injection point. It also positions them for separation and then releases them into space. With ignition of the upper stage, second half of the mission, we'll look more closely at the satellites. Eutelsat's fleet providing 5,800 TV channels that are received in over 270 million homes worldwide. Ariane 5 carrying Eutelsat West, Eutelsat 8 West B, and Intelsat 34, the world's leader in launch operations tonight, lifting satellites for two of the world's leaders in satellite communications. Arianespace orbits telecom satellites, but also satellites with many other missions. Rafi Moussalian, CTO of Eutelsat, retiring after 30 years. Been at Eutelsat since 1985. We mentioned many other missions. The first flights of 2015 show how the Ariane family of launchers is a good fit for all of today's space applications, technology, navigation, telecom, civil and military, private and public operators. The February Vega mission launched the IXV technology demonstrator, the re-entry vehicle for the European Space Agency. In March, a Soyuz sent up 2 more Galileo satellites in the European GPS constellation. Vega in June orbited Sentinel, an Earth observation eye in the sky for ESA. In our next film, also on our first passenger Eutelsat, by its builder, Thales Alenia Space.
Je suis ravi de partager avec vous ce moment exceptionnel pour Eutelsat. Le lancement d'un satellite comme Eutelsat 8WB est un événement extrêmement important et chacun d'entre nous, chez Thales Alenia Space, est très fier d'y être associé. C'est aussi le 143e lancement d'un satellite Thales Alenia Space avec Arianespace. Superbe partenariat qui est amené à durer. Eutelsat est un leader mondial et une entreprise visionnaire. Nous sommes très honorés d'être à nouveau à vos côtés pour un programme aussi important, et ceci pour la 25e fois. Eutelsat 8WB revêt une importance tout à fait significative pour la flotte d'Eutelsat. Il va non seulement en accroître la couverture, mais aussi servir les marchés très dynamiques de la télévision numérique, de l'Afrique du Nord au Moyen-Orient. Il est équipé des produits innovants et flexibles de la gamme SpaceFlex, et fournira des services en bande KU et en bande C. J'aimerais ajouter aussi, non sans une certaine fierté, que nous sommes très contents d'avoir livré Eutelsat 8WB avec plus d'1 mois d'avance, et ceci grâce à l'excellent travail d'équipe entre Eutelsat et Thales Alenia Space. C'est cet esprit d'équipe et de confiance mutuelle qui donne le ton de campagne humainement très marquante et émotionnellement très forte, la marque, je crois, de l'esprit qui règne entre nos équipes et les vôtres. Je tiens à remercier très chaleureusement Eutelsat, et en particulier Michel de Rosen, pour leur confiance renouvelée. Merci aussi à toutes les équipes pour leur travail et leur engagement. À celle de Thales Alenia Space, d'Eutelsat et d'Arianespace pour cette superbe campagne. Je souhaite à Eutelsat et à ses clients le meilleur pour Eutelsat 8WB.
Arianespace has launched 70 satellites made by Thales Alenia Space. The Ariane 5 program began in 1996. Double launches are its specialty. Tonight's no exception, with Eutelsat 8 West B and Intelsat 34. We launched 12 times in 2002, and we're on track for another record year at the space base. We're currently preparing 3 launches at once. In early September, a Soyuz will carry 2 more Galileos for that navigation system. Also in September, Ariane Spaceflight 226 will orbit another 2 telecommunication satellites. And Vega's 6th flight in November will orbit the LISA Pathfinder space probe for ESA. In all, after tonight, another 2 Ariane 5s, 2 Soyuz, and 1 Vega.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Arianespace and Intelsat, our second passenger, have been partners for 30 years. The relationship goes back to 1983 with launch of Intelsat 507. Intelsat 34 will replace Intelsat 805 in Galaxy 11. This latter was launched by Arianespace in December 1999, Flight 125. Turning to our second passenger, a film now on Intelsat 34. You'll be hearing from the CEO, Steve Spengler.
Thank you for joining us for the launch of Intelsat 34. There is nothing more exciting than seeing a rocket take flight with one of your satellites. Today's launch of Intelsat 34 is no different. Intelsat 34 will be used by millions of people over its 15-year life. The satellite's mission reflects the breadth and depth of Intelsat's satellite solutions and the services that we deliver to customers. From content distribution for customers such as Fox, HBO, European Broadcasting Union, Globalsat, and Encompass, to an expanded direct-to-home platform for Telefonica Brazil's GVT, Intelsat 34 is a shining addition to our sector-leading Latin America video neighborhoods. It also enhances our global mobility platform, allowing providers such as Airbus Defence and Space to expand their throughput over the highly trafficked North Atlantic. Today also marks a milestone with SSL, the launch of our 50th satellite together. Thank you, SSL, for your partnership and dedication. Together we can be very proud of what we contributed to a connected world. Thanks also to the employees of Arianespace. We rely upon your expertise and look forward to the completion of this mission and our next, the launch of Intelsat 29E. To the Intelsat mission team, we appreciate your hard work on our behalf. Lastly, thank you to our customers for your continued trust and support of Intelsat. Wishing us all the best of luck for a successful mission. Go Intelsat 34.
It was a relatively short program from signing of the contract to launch Intelsat 34 to today, 26 months. Intelsat 34 is the 55th Intelsat to be orbited by Arianespace, and there are 4 more in the order book. Intelsat 29E. Ken Lee of Intelsat said this morning that the campaign for this launch was so smooth that it was boring, which is, of course, what you want. The other Intelsats, 29E, also called Epic 1, 33E, Epic 2, and Intelsat X, which is Epic 4, plus Intelsat 36. Intelsat's first satellite, Intelsat 1, you might remember, was called Early Bird. Launched in 1965, the world's first commercial satellite. It weighed, anybody remember? 150 kilos. Intelsat 34 tonight weighs 1.7 tons without fuel, 3.3 tons filled. It will operate with KU and C-band transponders like Eutelsat 8 West B. The KU band will serve the North Atlantic Ocean for maritime and aeronautical applications. The C-band providing service for the Americas, Western Europe, and Africa. We are being followed by our next tracking station, Libreville in Gabon, on the west coast of Africa. More of the mission in a moment, but for now another word on Intelsat 34 from Space Systems Loral.
SSL, the world's leading manufacturer of commercial satellites, built Intelsat 34 for Intelsat, the leading provider of satellite services worldwide. Intelsat 34 will meet the growing demand for direct-to-home television and media distribution services in Latin America, and it will provide broadband for maritime and aeronautical companies serving the North Atlantic. The satellite is based on the powerful and highly reliable SSL 1300 platform. With 79 SSL 1300 satellites on orbit today, it is the world's most widely used satellite model. This is a result of its established reputation for quality and its versatility to support a broad range of applications and innovative technology advances. Intelsat 34 uses SSL's flight-proven electric propulsion system, which is actively in use on 17 satellites with more than 40,000 hours of successful on-orbit operation. Intelsat 34 is the 50th satellite that SSL has built for Intelsat and represents a long-standing partnership between the companies. That partnership is built on trust, and has lasted more than 35 years, with nearly half the satellites in the Intelsat fleet designed and built by SSL. SSL would like to thank Intelsat for its confidence over the many years, and it also thanks Arianespace, which has worked with SSL on more than 50 launches. With Intelsat 34, the SSL team, together with its partners, once again has demonstrated its commitment to provide a satellite destined for success.
Acquisition of our final tracking station at Malindi, Kenya, due right about now on the east coast of Africa. There we are, picked up by Malindi. Ariane 5 crossing Africa in about 5 minutes. The station will see the upper stage burnout and both satellite separations and the end of the Ariane mission. Ariane Space has launched 48 satellites built by SSL and its predecessors, another 13 in the manifest, including Intelsat 36 and Eutelsat 65 West A. Currently, SSL with 79 satellites operating in orbit. Company founded in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1957 as a division of Philco. Maybe some of you remember that, you Americans out there. Philco began launching satellites in 1960. We're coming up on cutoff of the upper stage engine in less than a minute. We will have extinction of the upper stage. Satellites will be separated when the launcher is moving at between 8 and 9 kilometers per second. Why? Well, it's close to the speed at which the Earth turns. 10 kilometers per second. That's also 36,000 kilometers an hour. Once they are released by Ariane, the satellites can get to that speed and to their proper altitude by firing their apogee motors. These motor firings are part of their early operations, usually occurring in the first few days after separation. We'll be back with more on that. And then once at this speed, they are capable of producing coverage over a specific geographic area because they're in what is called geostationary orbit. They appear to hover over one region, but they're actually flying the same speed as the Earth. On the animation, you saw the cutoff of the upper stage.
Extinction de l'ESC sur commande de guidage.
And the DDO has just confirmed it. You see our speed in the lower right, 9.3 kilometers per second. That's about the top speed. Emmanuel Macron, the French economic minister, on hand tonight, and we'll be hearing from him after the mission. By the time Ariane separates Eutelsat 8 West B at 28 minutes and 17 seconds, she'll be moving at just under 9 kilometers per second, about 8.9.
Acquisition d'un télémesure lanceur par la station de Malindi au Kenya.
At the Silda separation, remember Silda's the carrying structure for the second passenger, that comes at 30 minutes and 39 seconds. The speed drops again to 8.6 kilometers. And for separation of Intelsat 34, which comes at plus 41 minutes 51 seconds, speed down to 7 kilometers per second. So after hitting our maximum speed, we're now sailing without power. The powered flight phase of the upper stage ended when the onboard computer judged that the targeted orbit had been attained. So we're in the final flight phase, not powered, we're coasting. What's happening is the upper composite, and you can see it there, being spun up, beginning a series of maneuvers to reach the positions from where it can release the satellites. The upper stage has a dual role, propulsion and ballistic. The propulsion job is over, it's carrying out the second job now. The composite you see there is all that's left of the original 775 tons. You got 2 satellites, adapters, the Silda, and the vehicle equipment bay, about 10 tons, down from 775. You see our speed on the bottom dropping as our altitude is climbing, all quite normal. We are coasting, but that doesn't mean that nothing's happening. The composite is being maneuvered and spun. It's a series of over a dozen operations, ranging in time from half a second to a few minutes. The attitude and control system uses small thrusters to perform the maneuvers. You can see them popping on and off there. They have quite a job to do in the next 8 minutes or so. What they must do is orient the first satellite orient the composite, I should say. There's Rafi. That is a spring, an Ariane 5 spring, which he was presented with this morning for his retirement, because he's launched over 25 satellites, I think. So they gave him a spring as a as a memento. He was very moved. What they must do is orient the composite in the direction and altitude that the first satellite requires, then separate it. Then they have to start a second series of maneuvers to orient and separate the Silda in another direction at another altitude. And they have to do the same for the lower passenger. Eutelsat 8 West B due to be separated at about 1,100 kilometers up, coming up. And the Silda at 1,500 kilometers, and Intelsat 34 at 4,200 kilometers. And there we've had confirmation, and you can see it on the screen, of the separation of our Eutelsat 8 West B right on time. The first good news, you see the people in the hall here pretty much holding their applause very politely until the second passenger goes. The early operation maneuvers, as Ariane is being spun up to release the Silda, first telemetry acquisition about 21 minutes from now, after separation, by the Kumsan station in South Korea. There will be 3 apogee motor firings between tomorrow and 5 days after launch. Final deployment and final orbit acquisition in about 6 days, and she will be in service beginning of October. While we have a quick minute, the quiz question concerns the builders. All right, listen up, everybody. Eutelsat and Intelsat, though they have flown with Arianespace collectively 85 times, have never flown together before. But the builders have. So the quiz question, number 225. When was the last time Thales Alenia Space and Space Systems Loral flew together on an Ariane mission? Give you a hint, it's not that long ago. See if anybody out there can get this one. When was the last time Thales Alenia Space and SSL shared an Ariane flight? We'll give you the answer in a minute. While you're thinking, the ballistics phase continues. We have had, if you just joined us, successful separation of our first passenger, Eutelsat 8 West B. We're waiting now for the next step, which is separation of the Silda. That's due up in about 10 seconds. That's the black bell-shaped structure, I should say, just above the white part. The white part is the vehicle equipment bay where the computers are. When the Silda is pushed away from the mothership, we will see Intelsat 34. You see that happening. So you see Intelsat facing the elements, awaiting her separation. Another 10 minutes to go for her separation. And when Intelsat 34 is released at 41:51, that will mark the end of the first part of the ballistics phase. Silda separated out over the Indian Ocean, as will Intelsat 34B. We're still in what they call the space ballet. We're in the pointing up phase required by Intelsat 34 for its separation. Remember, the Silda, the carrying structure that allows us to lift a second passenger. We've used the Silda, or an earlier form of it, well over 100 times. Double launches being the Ariane specialty. There are 6 versions of the Silda, varying sizes. This one measures just under 6 meters tall. Separation marks an end as well as a beginning. It's the end of the launch vehicle's mission for the satellite, but also marks the start of the satellite's own life. And the Eutelsat people now getting to work. The satellite, basically a cylinder, the cylinder fixed on an adapter by a clamp, which encircles the cylinder, keeps the satellite in place. Separation is triggered by the clamp, which is cut at one point and becomes loose. This frees the satellite from the adapter and releases 8 springs, and you saw one of them with Rafi down there. These 8 springs push the satellite forward. When the satellite moves away from the composite, this activates 2 switches signaling separation, and this information is transmitted to the ground, and it's this that we get here in Jupiter. The ground stations, we want to mention, also sometimes have a brief telemetry loss due to the launcher's position. This is also quite normal. We don't lose the information, it's stored on board. The vehicle equipment bay, that's the white band there, inside that is something called the central telemetry unit, and inside that is something called mass memory. The exact times and durations of the signal loss are programmed into the unit, and the unit's programmed to record the data it would normally be sending to the stations on the ground. It's also programmed to start sending these data back when the signal has mentioned. I mentioned this when the signal has returned. I mentioned this because we had one blackout of 36 seconds between the Natal station earlier and the Ascension Island station, then another of 14 seconds between Ascension Island and the Libreville, Gabon station. Again, all quite normal and all under control. About 8 minutes to go before separation of our final passenger, Intelsat 34. Here's an interesting note you might not know. All the systems we've been talking about on the launcher, the energy systems, the propellant, the batteries, everything, they all have a sell-by date. If they're not used by these limits, they get thrown away. There's a similar system on airplanes. There's a similar system in your car, and of course, there's the same thing on the yogurt in your refrigerator. It covers everything on Ariane, from the turbo pumps down to the screws. In the vehicle equipment bay, for example, it applies to some of the clamp bands that we talked about that hold the satellites in place inside the fairing because they work with a system of spring compression, and the tension in the springs could go lax with time. The use-by date, of course, depending on their data manufacturer, and their manufacturer guarantees them for a certain time. The upper stage engine has a use-by date of October 15th this year. And the upper stage, the entire upper stage, has a use-by date of April 28th of next year. We're still in the ballistics phase. This is the final part of the first half of it. The first half will end with separation of our second passenger, Intelsat 34, due in about 6 minutes. Eutelsat 8 West B was in the upper berth and it was separated first. This usually is the case. The upper satellite is usually the heavier one and is separated first. Total payload mass tonight, just under 10 tons, just a hair under 10 tons.
The last Ariane space flight with Thales Alenia and SSL was actually the last of the previous Ariane flight.
Here in Jupiter are the operational teams, but in fact to launch Ariane or Soyuz or Vega, we also need to have security people and support from the Army. You may have seen some of these people on the road. Firefighters, journalists, many other professions. The Jupiter Mission Control is like the space base's control tower. It's like an airport in two parts, invited guests and the VIPs on one side. The room seats about 250, and the operational people in the other. We promised you a look at another center of action. This is the CVI, the Immediate Visual Control Center. This is a facility south of the space base, high on a hill with excellent visibility. The CVI has all the means for receiving, processing, and storing the data that's being transmitted by Ariane to the ground. And right now, these people are following and analyzing the key flight data. They report Ariane 5's flight status to the team back here in Jupiter. And the displays up there, it's at a place called Galileo, they allow us to check the main parameters concerning propulsion, piloting, and trajectory. It also is good for the customers. We can give them a first round of information. It's called an orbital diagnosis when separation occurs, and a complete post-launch analysis performed here about a week after every launch. 4 minutes to go until separation. Some of the people here in Jupiter, the operational teams, arriving very early, many hours before liftoff. First operations usually began somewhere around 4 and 4.5 hours before launch tonight. We had rain today. You saw it didn't affect the launch too much. We had a little hold. But here at the CSG, we're on the edge of the Amazon rainforest near the equator. Rain and clouds usually not a problem. What we do have to monitor closely are wind conditions. on the ground, and also wind conditions at high altitude, especially the beginning of the year. It's not a problem at this point of the year. Rain, not a problem. Lightning sometimes can be a problem. We like to avoid any risk from lightning that could harm the launcher. We are approaching separation of our second passenger, Intelsat 34. You might have been hearing in the news about Ariane 6, the evolution of the launcher. There is a Target 2020 program that's been put in place. A contract was signed last week, August 12th, by the European Space Agency and Airbus Safran launchers for the launcher system. Another one was signed by ESA and CNES, the French space agency, for the base. Europe's developing the successor to Ariane 5. More market-driven, more streamlined governance to meet customer needs. 2 versions of the Ariane 6 will be ready in 2020. At the same time, a new version of the light Vega launcher, called the Vega C, is being readied for her maiden flight in 2018. So Arianespace, with already 512 satellites delivered since 1980, looking forward to even more successful years ahead. And we are looking forward to confirmation of separation of our second passenger, Intelsat 34. Intelsat was created in 1964, and if I'm not mistaken, created on August 20th, which is today. So happy birthday, if I'm right. That's the same year as the CSG. A large opening on the ocean, as we mentioned, to make possible flying both north and east, because we fly north for polar orbits, also over an area that offers low risk to nearby population. A low population density, they also found here. Some 200,000 people live in French Guiana. Most of the nation is forest, as you have seen if you've been down here. They also found a nearness to the equator, which allows a launch to benefit from the Earth's rotation, which gets more quickly into orbit. The Earth turns more quickly at the equator than at the poles. This is called the sling effect. They also found that there are no hurricanes or earthquakes here, as can strike in other parts of the world. The CSG is the world's only dedicated commercial space base, Arianespace operating and marketing the launcher family of Ariane 5, Soyuz, and Vega. As we come up to separation of Intelsat 34 at 41 minutes and 51 seconds, just a minute to go, one of these moments of high concentration for everyone here tonight, for Intelsat and for the Eutelsat people as well, of course, representing months, sometimes years of work for some of the people here and around the world. So the mood here in Jupiter, I would say, very focused. Although most of the people, I dare say, have gone through this before, it's still a very concentrated moment. You don't want to say tense, you might want to say intense. 20 seconds before separation of our second passenger, and you'll see she'll be pushed away from the mothership like Eutelsat was, and you'll hear the DDO calling out that confirmation. You can see our altitude. We're approaching the 45 kilometers.
I don't know why it always is not sure.
And our speed is usually dropped to 7 kilometers. Waiting for confirmation.
Séparation de la charge utile Intelsat 34.
Again, Intelsat separated on button. Confirm. Goodbye.
Flight 224, July 15th. An Ariane 5 orbited Star 1C4 built by Space Systems L'Oreal.
Told you.
And MSG4 for EUMETSAT built by Thales Alenia Space. Before that was also this year, Flight 222 in April, Norway's Thor 7 SSL, and the French-Italian defense satellite Seacral 2, Thales Alenia Space.
Told you.
You get to watch a launch replay, which will be coming up in a moment.